Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 2:02 p.m. for today's briefing meeting. And today's briefing meeting, we will begin with Dr. Keith Martin, who will be reviewing the proposal for House Bill 7069 lawsuit.
Ms. LaRiviere, board members, there is an item on the agenda this evening, a good cause item, an attorney's recommendation, and the recommendation is that the Lee County School Board and our other school boards in the state of Florida in legal challenge to the constitutionality of House Bill 7069. It's my opinion that multiple provisions of that bill violate the constitutional authority of local school boards to operate, control, and supervise all public schools in the district. With that agenda item coming to you this evening for action, the issue is also established on the agenda of the briefing meeting this afternoon to provide you an opportunity to ask any questions or have any discussion that you may wish. Madam Chair.
Okay. Is there, let's see, we'll start with you, Ms. Fisher. Is there anything that you would like to bring up for discussion?
Well, yes, I had just a couple of general questions regarding the time frame of the involvement of such a lawsuit, the potential cost, and what would be the difference between the temporary and the permanent injunction? That might be, as far as proceeding with budgetary considerations this school year.
I'll be happy to go ahead and address that. The initial relief sought would be a declaratory judgment that all or a portion of the bill is unconstitutional and seeking a temporary injunction to enjoin its enforcement. Temporary injunction is based upon a cursory review of the evidence and a finding by the court that there's a likelihood of success in the long-term full litigation. That temporary injunction could be received in a short period of time, possibly within 30, 60 days. A permanent injunction would then be the result of a full trial, which may take much longer, could take a year, possibly even more. So in terms of planning, certainly in advance of receiving some form of relief in the form of an injunction, I would not make any suggestion or any recommendation to change planning with respect to budget and other issues that may be affected by the bill. And even after the issuance of a temporary injunction, if that occurs, that's not necessarily conclusive with respect to whether there'll be a permanent injunction. So I would still exercise caution in making any adjustments to the budget based upon such an order.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, there was another issue that you mentioned. Was it cost?
Oh, yes.
And the initial request that I'm making is for authorization up to $25,000 funding from the Lee County School Board. As you're aware, there are a couple of school districts, school boards that are already voted to enter into this litigation. And the relevant school board attorneys have been having discussion around selection of a law firm and sharing the costs. So it would be a shared cost. The cost could be more than that at some point, but initially that's my best prediction.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Giovanelli.
Okay, for me, my question is, the other day you thought it might be up to 10 other districts. Where's the number at today as far as other participating in the lawsuit? Because I think that's really important that we collectively do it and collaboratively do it together. So I was just curious about that in the other districts in Florida.
Yes. At this point, there are 2 other school boards that have taken a vote, have voted to take part in the lawsuit. Including the Lee County School Board, there are 3 boards today that have this matter on their agenda. So potentially at the end of this day, there may be 5. There are a number of others that are having discussions.
Okay.
In discussions I've had with the attorneys, of course, they cannot speak with certainty as to what their board will do, but It appears there's a potential possibly for another half dozen or maybe even more, but it may be 5 or 6. It's very hard to predict.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and then,
Ms. Fisher?
yes, and I think I read that Palm Beach is going to do this on its own. How does that-
Apparently that, I did read that in a newspaper story, and that was part of a discussion. I don't know, I wouldn't assume that that conclusively is the answer at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Petricka?
So I actually asked to have this added to the briefing agenda today because I wanted to make sure that I got a feel for how my fellow board members felt about this before we took it to a vote tonight. From the beginning of my time on the board, I've been very concerned about voting on an issue that's raised the same day, and that's what we're doing here. That being said, we've gotten quite a bit of information from Mr. Martin over the past, I don't know, when were we at FSBA?
Since first
Since
week of June.
Since we first, I mean, the first time I heard about a potential lawsuit was at FSBA at our consortium meeting, and I've been looking into it since then individually. Mr. Martin has provided us with information about it since then, individually, individual board members, but we haven't had the discussion.
Right.
So I wanted to have the discussion before we voted on it tonight. I fully support our entry into the lawsuit. It really is the only hope that I have at this point with regard to maintaining local control and taking a stand. One of the issues that has been raised is potential backlash from our local delegation or from elected representatives at the state level. And I don't see backlash as being an issue here. I think they are professionals who will understand that we are representing our constituents, and it's important for us to do what's in the best interest of our constituents. They have so many other issues on their plate. This is a matter of, we don't agree on an issue, and that's what the courts are there for. The courts are there to come down on one side or the other, and this is not personal. This is not about them as individuals. This is simply about the legislation that they supported this year. So, and then the final thing that I would feel most comfortable with is if we as board members make sure that any public comment we make with regard to this lawsuit, with regard to the underlying legal issues in the lawsuit, be left up to Mr. Martin. And that we, to the greatest extent possible, refrain from any legal analysis of the underlying issues.
I agree.
That was really it for me. So, I guess the last thing is, we've heard from Mrs. Fisher and Mrs. Giovanelli. I guess I've heard questions, but I haven't heard how they feel about it or where they're leaning in terms of.
I think we can go back.
Consensus.
I think we can
Okay.
go back and get a feel for that. Mr. Toiber, any thoughts, comments?
I'll defer right now until I hear a little more. I have a lot to say, but I'll defer right now.
Okay. Ms. Morgan?
Well, I couldn't be more articulate than Ms. Petricka, so ditto. Thank you. You hit all the relevant points. Thanks. And I do support it.
And I will have to say that I support it. Just as Ms. Petricka said, since we read FSBA, I have been looking at this and staying abreast of it. Thank you, Mr. Martin, for information you have provided us and the time that you spent with us in conversations. I am in support of this. I don't believe we need to have a fear of backlash. And shame on any of us if we make this a personal piece. This is about disagreement on how we view statutes and the law. And I believe, as you said, it's up to the courts to make that decision. So I am in support of moving forward with this evening. We will go back to, and Ms. Fisher, do you have any comments about your viewpoint?
Well, yes, I'm in support of it, and just recently, this morning, I reread Mrs. Morgan's editorial that appeared in the news press, and with consideration for the fact that we are forced to share capital dollars that we really don't have in the face of growth, this is definitely a loss of local control over our Title I funds. And so I feel that we do need to take a stand, that we do need to protect what happens with our constituents' tax dollars. So I am in full support of it.
I am too. I agree. We need to keep local control here, and that's really the most important thing. And if we don't make a stand, then we're not going to advance, and we're growing, and we have no choice. So it's going to stop us from progressing, and we got to reach that Vision 2020. So.
Mr. Toiper, do you have anything else?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I concur with everybody, and I think everybody hit it well. Ms. Fisher said it probably the best. This is, by far, this was an appropriations bill, and it's fraught with policy. And it's policy that's going to fundamentally change how school districts in Florida do business. And it is the most usurpation of school board control that has ever been, I think, that I've ever witnessed, from our capital dollars to our Title I, to our charter schools. I believe that, our district, I don't think our legislation, a local delegate will be too surprised, because we approach them for help with capital, and in turn, this is, to the contrary. So I don't think that it's a mystery where we stand. And they have a job to do, and we have a job to do. And our job will be completely subrogated by policies put in by this particular bill if we don't challenge it. I am not a fan of school districts or entities suing the state. I totally am not. And I don't like extra litigation for the taxpayers. But I think if every taxpayer understands that, their taxpayer dollars are going to go to for-profit companies, taken out of the, away from students in public facilities, they would understand. But more importantly, anybody who is a constitutionalist or conservative would understand that this whole House bill is unconstitutional. It's more than, it's not followed by the rules that they set up, that's in our Constitution. That's one matter, one issue, and it's a policy, policy changes that what frustrates me is I don't think the public fully knows, and I think this lawsuit will bring to light the fact that most, if not all, of what got forced through underwater secretly through an appropriations bill died the previous year. On some of them didn't even get brought to the floor, and they died. And the ones that got to the floor and people got to argue, once the interest-based groups, anybody who's affected by it spoke, it quickly died. So you see all the things that the people, the voters, and the public, and the interest, anybody who's affected by these particular issues, were adamant against them. So what they did is they did smoke and mirrors, and they put it all in this bill. If we don't stop at this time, not only is the school districts of Lee County, or of Florida, going to suffer because of this particular instance, but this gives the gateway, the green light, that now this is how business is conducted in Tallahassee. This should be just a aberration for every single voter in the state of Florida. That is not why we put them in Tallahassee, to do what they want to do, but to do what the people want them to do. And this is a direct violation of that. So, and again, it's my soapbox, that's why I waited till the end, but I agree, we're all looking at it from a micro level, that this will hurt us as for this particular instance, but it won't stop here. Right. It is a clear hidden agenda that they want to change the rules to bias preference to charter schools. And, we've never asked, when they came for charter schools back in the early 2000s, they came and said, we can do what you do, we can do it cheaper. And we said, go at it. We're willing to try. And you go do your charter schools and keep the rules the same. Well, then they lied. Then they started changing the rules and stacking the deck. So every time there was an issue, the charter schools got benefited. Well, the one issue that they couldn't benefit was the capital issue, because the for-profit companies own the capital. So instead, they said, well, we'll just wait on that one. But they changed everything else, educationally. Now we're at the point finally where that's the last stake in the game, and they're changing it for the capital. So I support it fully, that we need to do this. If for nothing else, we're trying to convince the taxpayers that we have a short of capital. We've demonstrated it, and we'll continue to do that over the next several months, because we've made a concerted effort that we're all in agreement that we just have not. We were shorted 71. I can't even remember the number now. 71 million. No, 313 million over 7 years. So, and we're trying to get that capital back, and now they're gonna try to take more from us. You know, we're doing everything we can. You know, we're selling anything we can put a name on it. We're doing everything we possibly can. But meanwhile, while we're trying to, put more water into the bucket, they keep drilling holes in the bucket. So we can't win. And so at some point, we need the taxpayers to understand what we're doing and what we're up against and all the things we're doing, and that we're running out of options as far as to make this happen. We're not, we have no formula. We're one of the only few growing counties in the state of Florida. There is no formula that compensates us to pay for capital growth. We get students, every student has a FLE, on their backpack. We have funding for every particular student, but that doesn't put the seat, because that seat is not for a particular student, it's for that student over a period of time. So we need to have that capital expenditure formula, and have deaf ears up in Tallahassee. There has to be a way to fund growth in a way that our capital funding is done, and they don't even look at it. Instead, they're busy figuring out ways they can fund growth in charter schools. So, we have some serious issues that us as a board have signed up to do to fix the existing problems that we're facing. We certainly don't need to have this that really, abrogates everything we're trying to do to make things right. So I'm in support, and thank you for listening to my rant, because it's a long time coming.
Any other comments? Yes, Mr. Martin.
I just share with the board, I did talk to Dr. Kuckle about this matter. She asked me to express that she's in support of the recommendation.
Thank you. All right, well, if there's no further discussion, we will move on to Executive Services, Chapter 2 Policies, the pre-briefing.
That discussed?
If that is okay.
She has to go back over to the,
I have a
That is
Presentation.
perfectly fine. Nobody let me know on the agenda,
and I
so
have,
you are A-okay.
and I have no problem with that, so.
So we will go right to item number 2, student progression plan. And then we'll go to graduation services
Yes,
as well.
it's down a little bit further, graduation committee update.
All right, so we are going to take care of student progression plan later, because you're not on that one.
Yes.
Got it.
Okay, good.
Thank
Teamwork.
you.
Flexibility.
I'm a quick study once I figure things out. Okay.
We got this. Okay, thank you all so much. My name is Shelley Taylor. I'm coming to you today to give you some updates about the wonderful work that we have done in regards to our graduation committee. I really wanted to start with telling you about 3 different things that are really pulling us together. The graduation committee pulls together our vision. We pull together resources and relationships throughout the departments in the district. And we also pull together collaboration and strong decision-making based on data. And one of the wonderful things that you guys are aware of, but we have been able to solidify and have the actual role of a coordinator to focus on this. So I'm honored, I'm very thankful to be in that position as a graduate of Lee myself. So I have a lot of passion behind that. One of the things that we started with brainstorming is following the demand equality tool. And by doing so, we really got into alignment of, what were we measuring, what is our data, recognizing our data, owning our data, separating out what our graduation data is regarding our traditional schools, and then also pulling out the graduation data from our charters and our alternative schools. And because of that data, we began to have some very strong focused conversations with our charter schools about the barriers and the challenges. We have also pulled in discretionary projects from across the state. One of the benefits to working with discretionary projects is that they are DOE funded. Discretionary projects, for example, Project 10 is one of the strongest that we have a relationship with. They bring perspective of other districts and how other districts are overcoming the same barriers and challenges. They provide guidance to us, professional development and training, and is a free resource. And of course, because of that, we can share best practices. And bringing forward those best practices, we also want to recognize that position of the graduation coordinator is not one that overtakes anything else that's being done and the level of expertise that's in any of our other departments, but it really does help bring it together and enhance the work from the information specialist to how we're coding students, to how the counselors are already tracking students and working with them. So it really brings that together. One of the things also that we have learned as a graduation committee is that it truly is about engagement. So when we talk about identifying risk factors and identifying students, we are essentially talking about how are we going to keep kids engaged? How are we going to keep them from dropping out? How are we going to keep them on time to graduate so that they will count positively for us? And our graduation committee was able to attend an engagement training just about 2 months ago. It's called Check and Connect, so we do have some additional resources to bring forward the next year to help support schools. Okay. The committee has gained a lot of knowledge in how to pull real-time data to actually project a graduation rate. And this gives schools a real calculation. It identifies our students that are at most risk, and it gives schools a tool for targeting resources for specific groups of students, all in regards to either attendance, behavior, or course performance. And those are the three main ABCs that we come back to every time we are looking at on-time graduation. So we use the data, we sort the data in a different way, we filter the data, and then we can come out with an actual on-time real projection for a school. We also can categorize students into 4 different risk levels based on which indicators the students have. And we've taken this all the way back down to pre-K, which I think is one of the most wonderful things about working on a graduation team, is that it's way too late if we start in high school. We have to look at middle school, we have to look at even pre-K. So we're looking at those indicators, identifying students at a very early age through an early warning system, but then we're also continuing the same color coding for students as they get into high school and they're meeting graduation requirements and staying on track for that. Okay. So the district has worked together. We've sat face to face. We've done a lot of research. When I say the district, I talk about the different departments, from our Department of Special Ed to our ELL, to our counseling department, to talking to Title I, to talking to our MTSS and intervention specialist, to talking to attendance, student welfare, and even accountability. So we've gotten the perspectives from all different departments working together on this goal to align us to have graduation success at least 90%, because we know it's not going to stop then. We've got to keep going. So a couple of things that I just wanted to wrap up and end with are some things as far as what's to come. We know the role as far as coordinator for graduation is new for us. It just started July 1st. So here are some things to come. Certainly success stories. We know that as we roll out a color coding projection for grad data and we start looking at groups of kids that are at risk, it's going to give schools a tool to be able to target groups of students, and then we'll have the success stories. What was implemented? How did it work? And then when we pull the graduation data, again, let's say 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, we'll be able to really identify, is that student still at a very strong risk, or has the student moved to a moderate risk or maybe a light risk? So we're also going to be doing quarterly graduation projections, at least quarterly. At any minute, we can pull up and we can sort and filter the data and get a real-time graduation projection. There's going to be the expectation of on-site support to schools. It could be myself, it could be a team of us going out from the counseling department to attendance. Again, we're gonna have to go back and look at why is the student at risk? Is it attendance? Is it behavior? Is it course performance? And then provide the support for the appropriate interventions. We also have focused trainings with our alternative schools and our charters that will occur this year. We'll be sharing best practices. I will be joining a state level PLC along with some other districts that are also using a color coding way of projecting data. And we're going to use local data to drive decision making. We want to share our graduation progress with other departments. And we also are working with career and tech ed, understanding the data that's coming out of, and the data is so much higher for students that are engaged in industry certification courses, and relevantly so because it's about engagement. So one of the last things that I will tell you about is our increasing community partners. And so I'm talking to you from a graduation committee team. However, we do have a very strong interagency council in our district. It's called Project 10. Project Transition. It's funded partly through Project 10. But we meet monthly and we talk about barriers and we talk about what our students, specifically with students with special needs, students with 504, students with IEPs. But we work together collaboratively and we will actually be a vendor at our new teacher orientation on Thursday to provide resources to new teachers about, here are some outside agencies that you can refer families to when you see that a certain intervention is needed or the family is looking for some support. And every year we get memorandum of understanding from those agencies. So I do think that our work with the graduation committee is also going to increase our community partners. So the last thing that I will leave you with is that we will have a department goal that is focused on the support to our tier 3 schools and those that are most in need and how we can support them. And through all of that, I certainly really feel that we will reach our 90% grad rate by 2020. So, do you have any questions for me? All the work we've done for the graduation team.
And just,
Board members?
just want to make one comment relative to Shelley's presentation. Just remember this this initiative came about because several of you were attending a workshop at FASBA, and where one of the districts, I think it was Pinellas, was presenting what they do. We brought this back. And they have, Soretta Ralph and her team went to work on this, and this is the outcome at this point. We're excited about it. It is in really good alignment with our strategic plan, and it also, one of the Shelley's charges, which she did mention, was it helps extend a handover to our charter schools so we can partner with them better, because ultimately they are also a part of our graduation rate, and we would like to see that improve as well. So what we can do to collaborate and improve graduation rate for all students across the district, I think it behooves all of us to work better together. So, and then in considering who would be the right person for this job, when Shelley and I sat down, I don't know how, it's been a while ago, but certainly the right person, in my opinion. She has a passion for this work, and I think we can expect great things out of this position and this committee.
Board members? Ms. Petricka?
I remember that FSBA training, and I remember being in the training and thinking, wow, this is awesome, and then I turned around and looked at you, and you were taking notes furiously, and I was very excited that you were as interested as I was, and to see it take shape here in Lee County in a way that's appropriate for our students is fantastic. So thank you for your work on this. A couple of things that you said that are particularly exciting to me. One is owning our data. I'm seeing that happen across departments here at Lee County School District. And, when I was campaigning for this position, I looked at the difference between charter school graduation rates and traditional public school graduation rates and thought, oh, well, that's their problem. They're bringing us down, but that's their problem. And we don't take we don't have that attitude when it comes to other people's problems. They are our problems. If they're impacting our students, they're our problems, and we need to find a way to solve those problems. And working with our charter schools in the way that you are is fantastic, and it's kind of ironic, given the fact that we're suing the state over there's a board of charter schools. But that goes to the point that I made earlier, which is, this isn't personal. This is about what we need to do for our students. And reaching out and sharing best practices with charter schools is fantastic. The other thing is the state level PLC that you're joining. I'd love to see that opportunity at every level of education in the district. I'd love to see, a chair of a science department be able to join a state level PLC for all science teachers across the state. And with technology the way it is, I feel like that should be something that's done relatively easily, but to see you start that is really exciting too. So thank you for your work, I appreciate it.
Welcome. I do have a gift for you before I leave. It's a secondary transition resource guide. So inside of it, you will see different agencies in our community, how to connect families to those communities, or those agencies. And then here's also what we call your key to successful transition in life. And we provide these to students and families, and there's lots of data and documentation on here in regards to successful life after high school and how to get connected. So I wanted to leave those with you all as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Last call? Okay, then I have to say something. I've had the pleasure of knowing Ms. Taylor for quite a while, and I just appreciate the fact that you are well-versed in elementary, middle, and high school, and that you're able to see it through that whole broad spectrum. And the fact that you are, when you are given a task, you take it and you run with it. And I appreciated the conversations we've had about how you're excited about it and growing through it. So a thank you to Dr. Atkins for affording our staff opportunities to grow and be actively involved in decision making. I really did like the inclusion that was put in at the beginning, that was not just to succeed in career and college, but it also said life. That is a very critical component. We may want to consider that for just something with things that we do within our district, that we think about that aspect. And a question that occurred to me, and I don't want to encumber things, but it would be a curious piece to look at the data for the students who have been in Lee County schools since primary grades, kindergarten on through, because I'm curious if we would find that there is a higher success rate for those students who have been with us all the way through, and kind of look to see at what stage we may see where the breakdown starts to happen.
That is definitely something that I can work on.
Okay. Thank you.
That's a good point.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Okay, now we will go to Chapter 2,
Okay.
Policy Briefing.
Okay, Madam Chair, members of the board, let me tell you how we're going about the school administration chapter 2 of the board policies. Ms. Elkin, as you know, unfortunately has retired, and we all miss her dearly. So what we are doing is taking these a chunk at a time. So we're going to do 5 policies at a time instead of an entire chapter or half a chapter. And we are going to bring them for pre-briefing, then briefing, and then you will vote on them, and then we'll start anew with 5 more. The 5 before you have been reviewed by myself, Mr. Martin, Ms. Elkin at the time, and they've been sent to all of you board members. Dr. McCullers and Ms. Ralph are now involved in this project also. So I will open it up to you if you have any questions about the first 5 board policies. Our plan is to bring these back for briefing at the next meeting, and then eventually for public hearing, it appears at this point would be probably the first meeting in September or late August. So any questions? Yes, Ms. Fisher?
I just have one question about a policy 2.05,
Okay.
animals on school grounds.
Yes.
Okay, so I noticed that it said only service animals. Otherwise, animals are strictly prohibited. Included in service animals are those, there are organizations that bring dogs to school to read with kids and that. Are those included in the definition of service
Well,
animals?
if you look down, it says, and animals which may be on school grounds for educational purposes.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Ironic you asked that because my wife has a very successful program of bringing dogs to school at Edgewood Elementary. And my personal interest in this would be not to forbid her from doing that because those children are learning how to read because of that.
Okay.
And so that would be considered an educational purpose, as would an assembly where someone comes in and brings animals. And Dr. Atkins is an animal person, so I know that's near and
Yes.
dear to him also. So that is not our intention and never has been.
Okay. Okay. And so that covers it then? Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
Anyone else?
Mr. Toiber?
Thank you. Mr. Doig, on the policy on the weapons on the school ground, can you
Yes.
tell me the direction? And I don't believe that was a direction from this board as far as the policy change, as far as the waiver of the exception of 79115. Can you?
I think Mr. Martin may need to speak to this. I think there was an occasion where this may have been addressed with a previous board, not the currently constituted board, where we modified this language. So, Mr. Martin?
Yes, the relevant statute that's referenced there, 790.115, is a statute that has the basic prohibition against the possession of firearms, weapons on a school campus. The statute provides exceptions indicating that a person may carry a firearm in a vehicle and they pursuant to another statute, and that statute requires the firearm to be concealed and encased, except that school districts may adopt written and published policies that waive the exception for the purposes of student and campus parking privileges. So in the past, this policy just prohibited weapons in vehicles on campus. The revision is in order to directly take advantage of the opportunity in the statute to waive that exception, so it's clearly within the requirement of the statute to be enforceable. That language is not required, that's an option, and the statute gives the school boards the option of adopting such an exception, such a waiver to the exception of the statute.
Question, and this comes from some conversations with sheriff's deputies. If they were to, on volunteer time, when they are not on paid salary, but they have children at a school, and they want to go and do volunteer time, based on item number 3, would school principals be able to approve them having their weapon with them as long as the ammunition was not in the gun, but they had access to it?
I'm sorry, in what example, when they're a volunteer, for what purpose?
Volunteering they're a volunteer within the school, serving, and maybe they're working in the production room, or they're
Okay, so,
volunteering with,
right, in that situation would be in order to support a school-sponsored event or school-sanctioned activity, so the principal could provide permission for that purpose, yes.
thank you.
Pam?
Miss-
Oh, Mr. Toiber.
So I guess my issue is that the exception, there's no guns on campus, I get that. But if somebody, for example, is coming to an event, they've got a concealed carry weapon, whatever, they are in their normal course of business carrying a weapon. For them, they would actually have to go home, put their weapon home, come back to the school, and same thing, and it pertains to everybody, and the statute says, no, that's fine, leave it locked in your car, there's a procedure, leave it locked in a gun case, it's fine, it just can't be brought out of the car. The statute put it there so as to not burden our citizens when they're attending, school property. I'm good with leaving that exception there as the legislature's provided. They did give the exception for school districts. I don't know why to waive that. I don't know why. But this board hasn't had that conversation. I don't want to support it, and I want to know how the rest of the board is. I don't want other instances like we had, down in Estero when someone had, they had a knife in their car and they were expelled for having a hunting knife that they'd forgotten in their car. To me, it's just being overzealous. If it's locked in the car, it's locked in the car. It's locked in a case. It's not an issue. If it gets pulled out, and again, you say, well, guns kill. Well, come on, it's locked in a car in a locked vehicle. That's why the exception was there to us to put onus burdens on our taxpayers and our citizens to participate. One of the biggest issues that I get with our district is, that it seems like we don't invite the public to come to our schools. We got big fences and we have big rules and we have all this onus stuff. And I understand a lot of it's for our protection, but the public perception is that we go to the nth degree on all these things, and I think this is one example. It doesn't require us to do that. It provides an exception in statute. I think the statute speaks for itself, and I don't want to go that extra step, even though we have the ability to do so. Because again, probably some interest group said, pushed the lobbyists enough to give them an out and say, okay, if the board wants to take that affirmative action and go that extra step, we're not gonna, it was not a battle that legislator didn't want to die on. But the intent of the legislative body was to say, these are the rules to allow it to be reasonable. And to me, I think it's reasonable, and I won't support it. And I'd like the board to have their comments to say, do we really want to be that, in an effort when we're trying to get parents to the school, we're trying to get more participation of the community, recognizing the demographics upon where we live. I don't support it, and I don't know which board, if the previous board did it, that's something, but this is the board that's going to vote for it, and I'd like this board to weigh in so that at least it's on record so that the public knows where everybody stands on this particular issue.
If I could chime in, Mr. Toiber, and I think Mr. Martin can probably elucidate these comments. I have had conversation over the years with assistant state attorneys who have informed us that it makes it very difficult to prosecute someone who may even have malicious ideas from having a firearm on campus if we don't have this in our policy. So I understand your comments, and whether I agree with them or not, it's not relevant, but I get it. The dilemma is, if we had an incident at a charter school in Cape Coral a number of years ago, and that individual was there relative to something going on domestically, and a firearm was found in that gentleman's vehicle, and I don't believe the state attorney was able to prosecute the case because we didn't include this in our policy, and the charter school followed our policies. So I think Mr. Martin can chime in. He's had those conversations with the state attorney's office also.
Yes, that's exactly correct. The present language, of course, is what you see in the black, which is just a straight prohibition of possession of the weapon in the vehicle. And when this incident came up, the advice was, with that language alone, we cannot prosecute. We have to have specific language with respect to waiver of the exception under the statute.
That's exactly my point. I don't want to prosecute if they've got a gun in their vehicle and it's locked and they follow the procedures according to the exception. I don't want to prosecute them for having a gun in their car because they're not doing anything that causes a threat or any harm to the district. If they take it out of their car, they're now in violation not only of our school policy, they're in violation of criminal law, and the criminal code will take over. Then you can easily prosecute them, and there's no issue. So if they're not doing anything wrong, then they're not doing anything wrong. And so to me, to want to prosecute them for having a gun in the car takes me right back to the Estero incident. I don't want to punish a kid who brings a hunting knife in that he's going to go hunting after school. If it's locked and it's in a locked case in a locked car, I don't have a problem with that, because and nor does our legislature. And so that's where I'm standing is, I don't believe our constituency in the demographics of Lee County want that either. We just don't need to be omnipresent, and that's my position.
So, Mr. Toiber, not to put you on the spot, but I think we can craft language possibly that satisfies your concern. So your concern is if that individual removes the weapon, theoretically, from the vehicle on school grounds. I mean, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. So I'm not sure Mr. Martin and I could put our heads together.
Well, I don't even think that's needed. I think, again, the 2A says a person shall not possess any firearm, destructive device, it goes through all the different weapons as defined in 79001, including a razor blade or a box
Right.
cutter. A box cutter,
I know.
okay? And so they're from work and they work at Home Depot and they carry a box cutter and they realize that they came right from work because they're working, a 4-hour shift before, after work, and they just always carry a box cutter because that's what you do at Home Depot. But you have it in your car, they're subject to expulsion for having a box cutter that they use for their job when they get out of work. But it says, and if they were to take that outside of the car, they'll be busted. It says they can't do it except for, it says, however, a person may carry, and it says, number 3, in a vehicle pursuant to except that the school district, in vehicle pursuant to 790-25-5, which Mr. Martin says, articulates a specific has to be in a locked box, in a locked car. They provide it very strictly. If the person were to take it and leave it on the seat, they're in violation, I don't have a problem. They can be prosecuted, not because of any policy we did or didn't do, but because the law kicks into effect. If they take it in their pocket and they happen to walk into the school grounds with the box cutter in their car, I'm okay with prosecuting them too, because, to me, that goes beyond, that's negligence, that's, again, they violated the law. But when they do everything according, because again, a student's driving to school now, and he's like, as he's getting out of his car, he's doing his check. He's, oh my gosh, I still have my work implement. So now he has a choice: going home and being, tardy and missing class, or put it in a glove box, lock the door and lock it, and not say a word. He's not liable. And if somebody, knows he's at Home Depot, or whatever, and says, "There's a car," first off, nobody should even know because it's concealed. You should never know. But if by chance he ever got caught with it there, he'd say, "Look, I did what I was supposed to do." That's what I'm saying. And I think that instance, I can think of many instances, people are going, coming from work, whatever job they have, and they might carry a firearm. They can't go they can't watch an after school event because what are they going to do with their firearm? Can't leave it by the side of the road. So you lock it in your car, you put it in a lockbox, you lock it, you lock your car, and you go do your stuff according to school district. So if you happen to leave it out on your seat, you're going to go to jail. And it's a felony, I believe. I'm not mistaken, but I think it's a 3rd-degree felony. If you take it out of your car, you're certainly going to, because now you're, menacing, display. I mean, there's several charges. So I just think that we don't need to add superfluous language to appear to be more onus than legislators intended.
Any board members wish to weigh in? I have to say, I am in agreement with Mr. Teuber. The problem is when they take the weapon out and they use it. If someone is going to kill, they will find something to kill. If someone wants to be violent, they will find something to be violent. There are situations, as the situation that happened with the student at Estero, where totally wasn't even thinking about the fact that she brought a knife to school and then someone happened to see it. I would like to see some language that we might be able to put in.
Well, that's
That
why
would
that's
fall
why
in
we have a
line with
pre-briefing. So
Yeah.
we can certainly
Those are my thoughts.
bring other language back to the briefing and consult and
Ms.
figure
Fisher?
that out. Yeah.
So this raises questions in my mind. I see the reason for waiving the exception and being clear about the fact that we don't want weapons on campus. Typically, if someone has a gun or a knife in their car and it's not visible, we never know it. I mean, we can't search every car that comes in and out. And I think we want to be cautious to the point of having the ultimate safety conditions at any of our campuses. I have a question about how this pertains to law enforcement officers who,
The statute specifically says it does not apply to law enforcement
Okay.
officers, and you see in the policy that
Okay.
superintendent is authorized to authorize staff and SROs and such to carry firearms.
right, because they do carry firearms even when they're not on duty.
Right.
Yeah, and so that would not pertain then.
Correct.
But I think we need to be specific about that. And then,
About law enforcement officers?
well, yeah, I mean, I think we need to have something in there because somebody was saying if they volunteer, yeah, they can still have their weapon because they're a certified law enforcement officer. Number 3, school principals are authorized to approve the presence of weapons on school campus in support of a school-sponsored event or at a school-sanctioned activity. And then they have to ensure that the firearm does not contain live ammunition. Does that mean, for instance, like an ROTC exercise or, I mean, because they have weapons, but they're not loaded with live ammunition?
Correct.
Is that what that means? I'm not certain about that.
Well, yes, it certainly would apply to JROTC activities, along with any other activity that might involve the presence of a firearm.
So say when we have our SROs or other law enforcement officers at, for instance, a football game, and they are armed, does that require approval from the principal? But then they have live ammunition. So how does that work?
Yes, they do. And of course, as I mentioned before, the superintendent has authority to provide permission for them to possess a firearm, and we can also add the provision that you suggested to make it clear that these restrictions don't apply to law enforcement officers.
Okay. Okay, that would be one thing. And I just want to make one more comment in regard to that incident several years ago with, I don't think that was a hunting knife. I think it was a steak
It's a
knife.
steak knife,
And I
yes.
think she was moving to another apartment and had a box of utensils there. And so I think that someone overreacted because she didn't take it out of the car. It was just sitting in there. But, yeah, I think the more specific we can be and the more we can clarify the whole intent, the better off we are in the event that someone does enter with a weapon in their car. And then, you know, like, what is a weapon? I have a nail file in my makeup kit, and so one time, someone had a problem because they had a nail file. So, how, you know, I think our definitions have to be really clear, and,
Well, the definition is referenced there as what exists in the Code of Student Conduct.
right. Okay.
If I may, just with respect to that Section 2, please understand that by suggesting the addition of that sentence, I did not intend to advocate for a prohibition of firearm on school grounds.
Right,
That prohibition already existed. That's the first sentence. I was
exactly.
just trying to create a sentence that was consistent with the first and provided enforceability for the prohibition that already existed. Certainly, it's within this discretion of this school board to remove that prohibition. If you wish to do so, certainly we can remove the second sentence. We would also need to make a revision to the first sentence to add this exception that's provided for in law, because now what you have is just a strict prohibition.
Right, but as you explained from your conversations with the state attorney's office, in the event that someone were to enter campus with a weapon in their car and then they took it out and it was obvious that they had the weapon. No.
No,
No?
if I may.
Mr. Tarver?
This legislature wrote an exception for carrying weapons for weapon possession. And in 79025, lawful ownership of possessions, their policy, the declaration of policy reads, the legislature finds as a matter of public policy and the fact that it is necessary to promote firearm safety and to curb and prevent the use of firearms and other weapons in crime and by incompetent persons without prohibiting the lawful use in defense of life, home, and property, and by the use of United States or state military organizations, and is otherwise now authorized by law, including the right to use and own firearms for target practice and marksmanship on target practice ranges or for other lawful purposes, and for lawful hunting and other lawful purposes. So that was their policy. So they said because of that, it goes through and it says if you're in the military, if you're a police officer, if you carry it to, you know, there's certain provisions that says it's okay to carry a weapon. For the schools, they're saying is it's prohibited to have it on school grounds. That's the law. It's a third-degree felony. If you're caught on the grounds with a gun, it's a third-degree felony. It doesn't matter if it's a example or not. And you're saying, well, people, if it's in their glove box and nobody knows, it's okay. You're still potentially liable for a third degree to become a felon. And so we're putting our parents in harm's way by saying, oh, just don't tell us, and you might end up being a felon because you want to watch your child play high school basketball coming from work. So they give you exceptions, and they say persons, police officers, so on. And there's a specific example, statute, and it's section 5. It says possession in a private conveyance. It says notwithstanding substance section 2, which is all the people that aren't required, that are okay, the police officers, military, so on. It is lawful and is not a violation of 790-01 for a person 18 years or older. So first off, you have to be 18 years or older. Okay, take that in mind in a school context. To possess a concealed firearm or other weapon for self-defense or lawful purpose, as again described above, within the interior of a private conveyance without a license, if the firearm or other weapon is securely encased, as is otherwise not readily accessible for immediate use. Nothing herein contained prohibits the carrying of a legal firearm other than a handgun anywhere in a private conveyance when used such firearms could be carried for lawful use. So they're saying if you're lawful to have that gun, as long as you have it in your car, locked in properly stored, it's not a felony. And so our position for the previous statute is saying we can do that, and it says that's the rules according to schools. But the school district can actually say we're not even going to allow that, and actually take away that exception that the state legislature provided. So we're circumventing what they allowed by saying our board wants to make it even stricter. And my position is I believe. And again, the gun's in the car. No crime's committed, nothing's wrong. Right. If they take the gun out of the car, they committed a felony. It doesn't matter what our board policy says, that's criminal law. If they take it onto the grounds, walk into the building, they've committed a felony. So those issues we're not being addressed at here. The issue about the girl bringing the knife into the school, it's strict compliance. If you have a gun in the school, you committed a felony, period. It's a statute for criminal. I'm saying is the issue is if it's illegal carry in a car locked, the state says it's okay, and we're trying to say, oh no, we want to further restrict our taxpayers, and I don't support that, and I don't believe. I'd like to put that out there I think that you need to go talk to your constituents and say, do you want us to be more onus in schools? And your constituents might want to, but I know mine don't.
No.
And Mr. Schweber, I hope you didn't misunderstand. I am in total agreement with what you said. So, Mrs. Morgan.
So, okay, now I would like Mr. Dudek to say again.
Yes.
What the rationale was for making this and why you were told.
The state attorney told Mr. Martin and I've had this conversation subsequent in a couple of other matters, I suspect, because they called to ask if we had it in our policy, that they could not prosecute an individual under the criminal law, 790-115, for possessing a firearm on school property in their car because we didn't have the exception in our policy, which is the language there. Now, having said that, the language is written poorly by the legislature, and it does say the board can have an exception for the purposes of student and campus parking privileges. Well, the argument could be made that only applies to students. So,
and employees who are parking on campus.
and employees. So the hypothetical, like a law-abiding citizen comes to school to volunteer or and simply has a locked firearm in the appropriate place, just because they come there on campus, our exception doesn't necessarily allow them to be prosecuted. It more than likely only applies to employees and students. So I think that's what we're trying to prohibit. But I understand Mr. Teuber and Ms. LaRiviere's concern. I mean, firearms are legal in Florida, and you can possess them under certain circumstances.
I guess then what we need to determine, and Dr. Atkins, I'm going to ask if you might weigh in, what are your thoughts? Because of it affecting employees is where this is coming from, and students.
Students, employees, that's really what it says.
Mhm.
Except in the beginning where it says the following rules and regulations shall be enforced regarding the unlawful presence of individuals on district property. So I
Right.
think that needs to be
It just-
out of there or changed, because it's now, rather than campus disorders and trespassing, it's weapons on school
That,
district
the
grounds.
prefatory language, yes.
Yes. So, and this does, as you read through it, apply to employees and students, not visitors.
Oh, except for under C, where it says violation by a visitor may lead to removal and an exclusion from the grounds of all district facilities.
Right.
So,
And I think that may have been pertaining to other language that was above it in the previous policy, so, okay, good point.
so then if this is strictly for students and employees, then that would need to be struck also, because,
Right,
okay.
yeah. So I will say that we'll rework this and bring it back at the briefing.
Perfect, thank you.
Concerns are heard,
Thank
and
you.
that's what we'll do.
Thank you, Mr. Toiver.
Thank you. And just, I'm not at all advocating, at all, about weapons of any type on campus, period. I'm not. I just want somewhere to be able to, so that we don't impede people's lives to enforce what we believe. I believe our schools should be sanctuary, and even the discussion about, other, weapon, we have SROs, that's what they do. I fully support our SROs. I feel our district is very safe. I don't even look at having, what they're talking about, extra guns. I'm not a supporter of that at this point. I totally believe we have a great program with our SROs. We have fast response by all of our police forces. So I'm wholly on board with no guns on campus. I'm just trying to say, I don't want to put an onus burden on our taxpayers. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. So I believe you have,
Was Lori next?
as long as we're finished with all of the policies, is there any other policy that anyone else wanted to bring up? No? Then we are ready to move on to student progression plan.
Good afternoon, board members, Dr. Adkins, Mr. Martin. Lori and Brandy and I are pleased to be here today to pre-brief the student progression plan with you today. As a reminder, last year, the student progression plan, the high school program of studies, the middle school program of studies were all combined into one document, one comprehensive document. The student progression plan now includes what we call our district course catalog. We made that major change to this document in response to stakeholder feedback, to improve the ease of use of the document, and to reduce the duplication of information that was in all three documents. And we've received very positive feedback about that change last year. The student progression plan includes academic policies and courses that are aligned to the Florida Department of Education updates, state course code directory, and the focus scheduling system. And what that means is all of our academic resources, whether they are district resources or state resources, are completely aligned. Our schools request course additions to the student progression plan between January and April of the previous year. All of those school requests have been reviewed and added to the document as appropriate. So those additions are currently in the draft that you have. We have also added a middle school and high school program link in the document that's a live link. So you can actually go in and click the link for middle school, and you can see all of the programs available at that middle school and all of the programs available on the high school link. Some of the curriculum updates that are included in the student progression plan this year. As you've heard Dr. Adkins reference several times, middle school reading instruction is required for all students. High school reading instruction is required for all students who are minimally or substantially below grade level in reading. And we have a comprehensive health instruction that's required as a part of the middle school curriculum.
We also have reading, math, and science course progressions. Those have now been adjusted to more appropriately meet the needs of our students. So you have heard about how we are purchasing additional reading materials to try and better align what the student needs are with what the order of our progressions, and that's a K-12. So that in middle school there are some progressions that have shifted, in high school there are some progressions that have shifted to allow students those opportunities to grow all the way from kindergarten to 12th grade at their appropriate level.
We have two legislative updates this year that impacted our student progression plan. The first is House Bill 293, which removed the requirement for middle grade students to complete a career planning course. And then House Bill 7069 had 5 different impacts on our student progression plan.
So the first progression on our progression plan, the first impact, is one of the third grade good cause exemptions is removed under House Bill 7069. This is an exemption that was actually recently added over the last few years, and basically this good cause had indicated that if students had had intensive remediation in reading or ELA and they had a reading deficiency, that was a good cause exemption. Now basically they say in order to have that good cause exemption, the intensive instruction had to have happened in reading. We were already covered there, and that's the only one that they did in fact remove.
In addition, House Bill 7069 removed one of our end of course assessments. It's the one specific to Algebra 2. So the EOC is removed from Algebra 2, and therefore the requirement that it count as 30% of the annual course grade is removed. This bill also broadened one of the HOPE waiver options for students that complete 2 full seasons of a sport at junior varsity or varsity level. In years past, they also were required to pass a personal fitness examination, and that requirement is now removed, and thereby completing those 2 seasons is sufficient to earn the waiver for the HOPE PE/health course. This bill also updates the online course requirement and the ways a student may satisfy this for the high school diploma. Last year, a provision was added that allowed the option of an alternative online assessment. It was largely undefined for districts, that if students took this assessment and passed it, they could then waiver the online course requirement. It was pretty ambiguous. It's been removed from statute. However, they strengthened the language that provided districts the opportunity to provide a blended course in order to fulfill the online course requirement. So it can be teacher-led with online components, which we've had as an option, but now it's specifically defined in statute as blended learning. And then the last change from House Bill 7069 that impacted student progression is the early warning system that we have had in place for middle grades 6 through 8 has now been expanded grades K through 8. In addition, we had a change to 2016 legislation where the seal of biliteracy for high school students that was implemented last year on July 1, 2016, had to have a further definition applied to it by State Board of Education rule. The board met throughout the year and passed their final rule in April of 2017. We did implement this piece of legislation for last year's graduating seniors. However, the language may now be placed into the student progression plan because we have all of the details in State Board of Education rule as of April.
And before we take questions, we just wanted to kind of talk to you a little bit about next steps on this. We do have a briefing then scheduled for August 8th, as well as a public hearing for August 22nd. Do you guys have any questions in regards to this?
Mr. Toiber?
No, ma'am, no, we're down from, so the exceptions, there used to be 7 exceptions for the progression third grade, now there's 6. They got
Correct.
rid of number 7.
Correct. They've also added a little more intense language around, they've broadened the net of the students who are defined as having a substantial reading deficiency, and they've put some requirements in the language that those students have to have plans in place that are individualized plans if they're in K through 3, so that's where it kind of gets fuzzy if they get promoted on to 4th. But if they're in K through 3, it's broadened the net of which students we have to have specific plans in place, which students we have to provide specific interventions for. So they've tightened up that language a little bit. We're in compliance with it, but they have tightened the language around making sure, basically, we're trying to catch them before they get to 3rd grade, and then they're taking off one of those options.
And do those plans, that continues whether they get promoted or they get held back, those same statute, because it kind of reads that if they're held back, that they're required to have those type of plans and so on, but if they promote them to the 4th grade, then there's really not anything in statute that requires it.
Correct, unless they go under the MTSS, which it does not say it has to be an MTSS plan. It just indicates that it has to be either an IEP, which would be when they're under the ESE umbrella, or it has to be an individualized progress monitoring plan is what the language says, and that's applicable to K to 3. So in theory, you could have a K to 3 plan that may not be carried through in 5th grade. Now, if you're MTSS, that has some more language around it, which would track further. We tend to err on the side of tracking those students into the MTSS and having a more specific plan, but that's not true for all counties.
Thank you.
Ms. Patrica?
I don't have a question, I have a comment. When I'm out talking with various members of the community, they all think that we don't teach civics or patriotism or any of that. So I was really happy to see that quote, that teaching, quote, patriotism, responsibility, citizenship, kindness, respect for authority, life, liberty, and personal property, honesty, charity, etc., are a required part of our character education in the student progression plan. And also the requirement of, quote, the study of state and federal government and civics education in the social studies student progression plan. I was really happy to see that officially in there, so I can continue to tell them we are doing that for our students. So thank you.
I just want to thank you for the link for the special programs. I believe that's going to be very helpful to our parents who are thinking, they have a child in 5th grade and they're already thinking ahead to the next year.
Yes,
And same way for high school, so those links are very important. And it's also important for a good place for us to direct the public to
Yes, ma'am.
see the different offerings that we do offer in the schools.
Yes, ma'am. And once
thank
once the document is board approved, then it will be added to our parent portal, so parents will have an opportunity to access the document.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to mention, although this is a part of the student progression plan presentation, a lot of the things that you saw in there pointed out work that this team has done, along with Soretta Ralph and also the team of school development. A lot of work went into the reading program, the math, the science progression, ELA standards for excellence are part of this piece, the comprehensive health, and on and on and on. So these changes not only are just changes to our student progression plan, but also behind the plan, a lot of work relative to the subjects that are mentioned.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for all your work. All right, let's see. Next, we will have Dr. Itzen with the assessment calendars and school grades.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
The last two items. And if you don't mind, I'll start with the school grade summary, since that's for this past year, and then we can move on to the assessment calendar for the year coming up. This task is always a lot more pleasant when we have good news, so overall, we have very positive results from this past year, so that's always a plus. So I thought I'd start with the components of school grading. To tell you the truth, I don't know your level of understanding of that, and I thought we would review that briefly, give you a chance to ask some questions. Don't be afraid to do that, because I've been doing this for, well, going on probably 20 years now, and I still consult the 30, 40-page document that has the detail in it, and sometimes even call up to Tallahassee to get some clarification on how this works. And part of that is because they change things frequently in the school grading, and part of that is because it's just very complicated, who counts for what and that type of thing.
Right.
Fortunately, they have not changed the criteria for the past 2 years. So 15, 16, and 16, 17, we have the same criteria. And as far as I know, they're not thinking of changing anything for this coming year. So we may have 3 years of consistent data. So the components, there are 11 altogether, which count for the district grade, and some of them count for elementary, some for middle, and some for high. So you have your achievement measures, and that's basically the percent of students who score in level 3 through 5 on our state FSA exams. In mathematics, of course, at the high school level, it's broken out into the 3 EOCs, Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. With Algebra 2 going away, it would come down to the 2 other EOCs. Science, there's a science measure at each level. You have 5th grade, 8th grade science, and biology at high school. And your social studies only applies to middle and high school. Social studies for middle school is based on the civics EOC result, and for high school on the U.S. history results. Then you have your learning gains. You have learning gains in ELA and math applied to all levels, and you have the learning gains of the lowest 25%, and we're going to come back to that new calculation of learning gains that they've applied for the last couple of years. We'll come back to that in a second. Then there's a middle school acceleration piece, which by and large is based on our Algebra 1 success with our middle school students. It is a larger umbrella, so any student that passes a high school course that has an EOC, which might include biology or geometry, that would also count. It also includes industry certifications. That's where it gets a little complicated, because the industry certification, since the data doesn't come in until later in the summer and fall, then the industry certification credit is given to the school from the year before. So it's lagged, so to speak. And that's the case for the next 2 components as well, which are high school only, of course. So your graduation rate that counted for the 16-17 grades was actually the one from 15-16, and the same with the college and career acceleration, which is your success in AP, IB, ACE, industry certifications, and dual enrollment. So that adds up to 7 components for elementary school, 9 for middle school, and 10 for high school, and then all 11 for the district. We okay so far? Okay. So there are some additional criteria. Schools have to test a minimum of 95% of the students. If they do not attain that, then they get an incomplete, and you may have noticed that we have 1 school that got incomplete, and we're going to appeal that. We're still within the appeal window, and we expect that school grade to be released and to be a positive grade. It was a virtual school program, and as you might imagine, it's a little bit more challenging for them to get all of the students in to test at the appropriate time. Students have to be what they call full year, which basically they have to be in the same school in survey 2 and 3, and for the district grade in the same district. Our ELL students are included in the achievement measures only after 2 years, and 1 year for the learning gains components, providing they have scores 2 years in a row. We do have one other category, and that is called the school improvement rating. I won't go into it today, but you have some schools that fall outside the purview of school grading. They're basically alternative schools, and that's defined by their mission. So a school like Coronado High School, charter school, would be in that category, and they get a different type of rating, which is still based on FSA, but slightly different criteria. Okay, back just for a second to the learning gains that was put into place in 15-16. As you recall, in 14-15, FSA went into effect for the first time, and so in that year they didn't do the gains because it would have been from the old FCAT into FSA, so they applied this formula, which was different than the one that had been applied previously for FCAT. They've divided level 1 and 2 into what we call buckets, right? So you've got these categories, and students, as they move from bucket to bucket, so to speak, are counted as making a gain. That's for your level 1 and 2 students, and for level 3 and 4, if they stay in the same level, they have to increase their scale score, and if they stay in level 5, they're also counted. So that was brand new for us in 15-16, and we didn't know exactly how that was going to turn out. What happened was that a lot of the learning gains numbers were very low for a lot of the districts and the schools, and we saw a dip in school grades in 15-16, and so a lot of those have come up now in 16-17. The other thing I wanted to say about that is we've done some analysis on the percentage of students who make gains in these various categories, and over the 2 years, the ones that are the most challenging are we call them 1A, 1B, 1C for the level 1s. The 1C, the high level 1s, the 2A and 2B, those seem to be the place where we have the lowest percentages of students making gains, at least lower than in the other categories, which is interesting. Yes?
I went to a SAC meeting, and I can't remember which school where I attended the meeting, but they gave us a word problem, believe it or not, with this 1A, 1B, with the buckets, and they gave us several word problems, actually, and kind of forced us to work through, and it gave me the ability to really understand how this works and how difficult it is to stay a 3, a 4, or a 5, and the kinds of gains that need to be made, what we need to do for a student to make it from a low level 1 to a level 5, and the near impossibility of that. Did that come from the district, or was that something that was created by that school? Because I think it would, I mean, I'm new, so maybe the more seasoned board members already get it in that level of detail, but as a new person on the board, it was very, very helpful for me to understand. So is that a district thing, or?
Well, not sure which one you're referring to. We did have a presentation by the regional folks, led by Dr. Browder, actually, and they gave us some work to do in terms of specific examples. A student who has this scale score, this year, how many points does he need to make a gain for this coming year? And so, yes, depending on where you are within these levels, it's easier or more difficult to make a gain.
That's exactly what it was. It's like Johnny got whatever this year, and
Point's not a point.
yeah, exactly. A point's not a point. Exactly. It just helped me to understand. So
Right.
if you can track it down, great. If not, I'll try to remember what school it was and get a copy and
Okay,
give it to
yeah, I
board
think I
members.
have.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Love to.
Me too.
I think that would be helpful for
Yeah.
everyone.
I think so.
So then you can actually look at the numbers, because as you imagine, in each grade level, for example, the bottom of level 3 increases.
Exactly.
Right? So even if you're in level 3, even if you're above the minimum, you still might have to increase just to stay in level 3 at the next grade level.
Right.
At one time, that chart used to be available from the DOE state website. Is that where we can go to get that as well?
I'm not sure if those specific examples are. The difference is previously they assigned a number. Like
Right.
if you're in level 1 and you make a 5-point gain, you're good. And now it's not like that. It depends on
Have
where
to
you
move to
are
the
in
next
level
bucket.
1 and how close you are to the next category.
Because we used to be able to see at each grade level what the cut scores were for each grade level, so you could see those changes. So you knew how many, at that time, developmental scale score was being used to see how many more points they needed to
Right.
get.
Sure, we have that. We have that. We can even broken down by these categories. We
All
can
right, that would be
provide
helpful.
that to you.
That would be great.
So to the results, I have two slides that have these same numbers on it in a slightly different way, but here are the 11 components that apply to the district grade. And so you can see the percent of students that qualified in each of these categories. As the system changes, it's hard to compare, for example, the total number of points or that type of thing, because sometimes the total number of points changes. So what has been consistent for us is to look at our ranking, right, within the 67 districts. And you're familiar with that because it's in Vision 2020 as one of our primary targets, right? And so you see that the progress this year has been from the 35th ranking to the 30th ranking. Just to give you a little historical perspective, the lowest the district has ever been in the system is 22nd, and that occurred back in 2009 and 2011. So we're working back in that direction. This next slide shows you what the specific gains are, and so the good news is that we had increases in all these areas except for social studies. And if you look at the social studies percentage, 65, it's actually higher than most of the other components. But you have some positive movement in almost all of these areas. Again, just a couple highlights. The math, you see math achievement and math learning gains and learning gains of the lowest 25%. Those increases equal the highest increases we've ever had in the district in math. For example, back in 2014, we had exactly those increases, +3, +5, and +4. So that was great in terms of the historical perspective. Some of the others, there have been some years that they were higher, but I'll tell you, in a system like this, to have anything more than a +2, in my experience, is really a really good gain. The measures, like the middle school acceleration, that's only been around for a couple of years, and so that is much, much higher than it was in 15, 16. And of course, our grad rate and our college and career readiness also came up. Yes.
Go back, if you could go back a couple sentences, you said in a district of our size, an improvement of more than 2 points is impressive.
Yes.
Why is it impressive in a district of our size as opposed to like Jefferson County?
We test about 50,000 students, so 1% of that, if I don't make a mistake, is 500 students. So every percentage means that you have moved 500 students above the line or made more gain than the previous year. And so looking over, the history, we often had, a point here or there, sometimes 3 points, but it just seems to be moving a district of this size seems to be more of a challenge than moving a district with lower numbers.
And I'll try to weigh in on that just to give you an example. If you take a smaller school district and you are trying to implement, let's say, some best practices district-wide, you can do that more easily because you have less schools that you have to touch and less schools that you are monitoring. In our situation, what has been a significant challenge is monitoring the sheer number of schools that we have. One of the things that we tried to put forth this year to help in that is, of course, our Principal Lead program. What we are doing this upcoming year is we noticed when we looked across the entire district that because the monitoring of, let's say, reading, as an example, was not being done with fidelity, we had different reading programs, and the 6 components of reading were not hit at 100% across all of our elementary schools. So to make sure that reading program is implemented effectively, it just takes, I think, more monitoring than what you would see in a smaller district. Now, to further that cause this upcoming year, we did restructure academic services, as you know, and we have asked our school development folks who evaluate our principals to actually bring on more evaluators. So Ms. Macchia and Ms. Robery, along with Ms. Houchins, will be joining that team, so we have greater coverage among our principals in terms of how well are you implementing a particular program in a school. So not only is it more students that you're having to move to get those percentage gains, but also just making sure that a district initiative takes hold in every single building just requires more folks to monitor.
And will our dashboard help us to have more control over that as well?
Absolutely. In fact, one of the things that I heard a principal remarking on yesterday is that we're talking about the rollout of CASA 2020 is just how excited they were to be able to have that information within their school. Trey now says, I think it's something like 46% of the data is live, and that's never happened in our district's history. It's really where people like Brian Curls and others had to manually input a lot of that data, but Trey and his Agile team, along with Brian, have really done a really good job. So we're at 46%, and that percentage continues to increase. It seems like on a weekly basis.
So then, Dr. Atkins, is the evaluation of the principals implementing the programs done strictly by observing the data, or?
No, I think there's a lot of things that we take into consideration when evaluating the principals, but one of the things that is you literally have site visits where they walk the buildings with the school principals. They observe the principal and teachers in action, and with our new procedures relative to evaluation and supervision, I think we'll have literally more eyes on the folks this year, so we'll be able, I think, to gather even more information.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, and let me mention this as well. One of the suggestions, again, from this particular board table had to do with an executive coach, okay? When he came here, and one of the things that he started to look at is direct reports, areas of supervision, and so forth. And it's a person with a lot of experience in the seat of a superintendent. He had weighed in on that supervision aspect, and so that was one of the motivating factors for us making that change.
Thank you.
Okay, so a couple of other general picture things. This is the graph of the change from 2016, 2017, and so you see that we have 24 A schools now compared to 15 in the previous year, and no F schools, as you know.
Well, and one little qualifier, some of the quote D schools are barely there. And the progress, let's just say Manatee Elementary, who really was a low F and wound up being an extremely high D. They, because of that grade, do not get the credit for the remarkable gains that they actually made in the course of the year. And don't forget that Mr. Lamar was down, I think, something like the neighborhood of 35 teachers
That's right.
July of last year. The great news for us moving into this year is that many of them have that year of experience plus under their belt, so we look forward to great things from that school this upcoming year.
I gave you a breakdown of the grades by level. I'm not sure what quite to make of it. It seems like the high school challenge has been a bit more rigorous over the years. Middle schools actually have the highest proportion of A schools. The high schools deal with a wider range of criteria. I don't know, like I say, what might be the reason for this, but it's over the course of the school grading history, I think more often than not, your high schools have had the biggest challenge. In terms of improvement, so we had 26 schools that improved, which is 27% of the total. There were 95 graded schools this year. Two of schools had an increase of 2-letter grades. I deliberately did not name a lot of individual schools in this presentation, but that was Bayshore Elementary and Calusa Elementary went up from C to A. And then, of course, James Stevens went from F to B and went up 3-letter grades. And then we had the other results as you see there. On the next slide, I took out the charter schools just because I thought you might be interested in that. And so the percentages changed slightly. They're a little bit more positive, so we have a higher percentage of schools that improved and a slightly lower percentage of schools that declined. And lastly, I just want to highlight the schools. Dr. Atkins spoke of the 1F school, Manatee. On the right in the graph, you see that of those F schools, one improved to a D, that was Manatee, and of course James Stevens improved. And then on the left, the D schools, we had 3 schools that stayed in that category and 5 of them that improved to a C.
Dr. Atkins, what's the name of the principal at Manatee? Is it Ashley?
Ashley Lamar.
All right,
yes.
thank you.
One of the things that I also want to mention about this data that I think is important to point out is that if you look at our DA schools and our schools that we really focused on this past year, just about everyone with I believe one exception, the rest of them made significant progress. Where we saw some of the majority of that decline was kind of in the middle, these schools that were kind of, quote, off the radar screen. And so with our new innovative support design system, I think with the tiering of schools, I think you're going to find those schools fall back onto the radar screen. So you literally have 4 different levels, 3 of which are more highly monitored. So I think that will help us be able to target resources at that school in the middle of the year so we can avoid some of those declines for some of those schools in the middle.
And in that design, we've included a lot of schools that have a grade of C as well.
Right.
Correct? So
Yes.
that would encompass a wide range of schools.
Actually, some of our highest performing schools, some of that have even received national recognition, saw some decline this past year. And with the new innovative support design system, that would be a school that type of decline would be picked up on, and we could target resources to prevent that from happening.
So that's what we have on the next slide, just some of the things that we observed. I think I've mentioned all of these. We did see general improvement and the students in middle and high school doing a lot better in acceleration courses. And hesitated to put any focus areas in terms of the content. I think I only put ELA and math here because they make up the majority of the measures in school grading, right? So, and of course, they're recognized as the core.
One of the things, the language arts, ELA in particular, first of all, ELA is one of the more difficult areas to make significant progress. You see that we did make significant progress in mathematics this year. I think the ELA will come. It will just take a longer period of time. I do say hats off to our team because I think with the comprehensive reading program that they have got going, K-12, that's going to dig in and make a big difference, as will the materials that you all supported, because that will allow us to implement, reading, I think, with more fidelity across the district. We've got a pilot this year occurring at 14 of our schools. If that pilot is successful, then we will move forward with expanding that pilot because we think that those materials are more on point as it relates to the standards. And the last thing I just want to mention is that our ELL population continues to grow. So the challenges that you see at some of our schools like Orange River is that, Karen is going to be testing more students in third grade this upcoming year that have significant challenges than she did this year. And this year, she tested more than last year. So her challenge continues to grow every single year as our population in that area continues to grow. And by the way, I think it was mentioned, we have a 30% turnover there, so you're dealing with 30% new students. So as we grow, we also grow in the number of challenges that we deal with, but we've got an exceptional staff that's really, I think, doing a really great job.
And they did put in the clause that they don't include the ELLs in the achievement part for 2 years, but if you have experience learning a foreign language, it's quite debatable whether or not the average person would get up to a high academic level in 2 years.
No.
So it's quite a challenge.
Right.
Any other questions about school grades?
I don't have a question as much as I have a comment. We are absolutely headed in the right direction. And we've talked about the fact, Dr. Atkins, that you're not happy with the speed with which we're moving in that direction, and I'm not either. I feel like a jerk saying that after you explained why it's so difficult to move a district of our size forward. But bottom line, this is why we do what we do, right? Is the achievement of our students. And I feel that you've put the proper measures in place to move us forward more rapidly, and I know that your staff is on board here at the district, and I feel like as these initiatives are taken more seriously and embraced more at each school, I think that we'll see a even bigger move forward or a faster move forward, if that's the right way to say it. I just don't want to end this discussion with anyone having the impression that we're celebrating these results. I'm not celebrating these results. I see them as a step in the right direction, but there are a lot more steps in the right direction that we have to take. Am I making, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it is important for us to pause and celebrate a little bit, which we did yesterday actually at leadership, and recognize some of those schools that did make really great gains. But we just pause for a brief moment and understand that there's a lot of work ahead. I do want to say that I think one of the things that's going to help us really make this stick is we continue to have shareholder input and have our principals involved in this decision. And I'll just give you an example of most recent, our algebra. There's always that debate about the 8th grade in algebra. And we did have one administrative team that wanted everybody all eighth graders taking algebra. And, you know, our middle schools are concerned about those acceleration points, and they get those by putting them in eighth grade. But the other concern is making sure that kids are proficient before they hit that algebra. Our middle school principals worked with our district staff, came in, and they've got a plan to, I think, address proficiency, and that will give multiple pathways so that eventually we're going to get more kids taking algebra in eighth grade, but we're going to do so in the right way, which is to making sure they're more proficient. And it's those types of steps that we take, which bringing in our principals, involving in those decisions, that I think will allow this stuff to stick district-wide. And so what we saw happen this year, I think we put a lot of things in place that we start to see the impact of that moving forward. So while we didn't move as fast this particular year, we moved in a positive direction. I think, you know, just like you see those, I hate to use this analogy, but I'm going to use it. You know, dragster starts moving forward, and it takes a while for those tires to grip. And I think what we're going to see next year is those tires are going to really grip, and we're going to take off.
And it's a belief system too, right? And we had a long way to go when we started, and Ian starting to see us move forward will allow each of the buildings to start to take ownership for their own piece in our success. And if you don't believe you can do it, it's never going to happen. But starting to move us in the right direction is going to allow more broad-based belief, which I think will have a larger system-wide impact, so.
Okay. Mr. Toiber, then Ms. Fisher.
I agree. I think it's about momentum and sustainability. I mean, I can't tell you, and education's no different than corporate world, that every day that, you know, what's the book of the day and what's the philosophy of the day, and, you know, what are we doing? And I know teachers, senior teachers will say, you know, we're trying this program and then this program, and they just don't. There have been so many of these programs, it's hard for them to fully believe. And so when they start seeing that the system, the very rigidity and the foundation upon which we're building is solid, then it will continue, the momentum will start to build, and they're saying, oh, this isn't just a fad, this isn't a phase, this is the direction we're going, and this is the structure upon which we're on. And you see more and more of that buy-in, so I think you'll start seeing it not be linear, but exponential. And, you know, I appreciate you not getting, put the cart in front of the horse. So it's we all want to go, but I think the way you're doing it is prudent, so good job.
Ms. Fisher.
So, number one, I think we do have to celebrate every step along the way. I've been in this district a long time, and I have seen us ride an amazing roller coaster up and down, and it has been what's the flavor of the day, and different programs being introduced, and rules being changed by the state, and the criteria being changed. All the while, we continue to grow and adopt a more challenging population, like Dr. Atkins just said about Orange River. We are testing more children with language barriers now than ever. We have kids with many other societal problems that are entering into our system. So to stay constant, and now we're entering our third year without a change from the state, which is giving us some consistent data so that we can actually measure the growth. But having been in the weeds in this district, growth is happening every day and kids are learning, and you can go and pick out many individuals who have come from other countries or who have been here for a long time, who have grown tremendously and who are learning and who are competent and capable because of what our teachers and our staff are doing. So I think it's very important, and I am celebrating it every day because I see how hard everyone is working. So I just wanted to say that, and then I think it's going to be really interesting when we hear back from Shelley about what about those kids that have been here K through 12? What's their success rate? What's their graduation rate? And so I think that will give us some information that what we're doing in this district is really good work. And I have traveled to other districts around the state and in other states, and I've talked to board members in other districts, and we must be doing something right because we are on the cutting edge. And I just had someone call me yesterday and say, from upstate New York, an old employee. Well, every time I read online about Lee County, it sounds like really good stuff is happening there, and that is not happening here where I am now. So I feel like, yeah, I'm ready to celebrate every little success, because in doing that, then we support and encourage the people who are doing the work, and we make our kids feel more viable, and I think that'll continue the success. So, thank you.
Ms. Giovanelli?
Well, I just agree with that. I think it's just the wheels are in motion, and consistency is really important, and, working together, that really, and being efficient is really important. It's important all the way across Lee County for us. So I think the numbers are pointing up, so that's good. I think that's great. So I just want to add that, and for everybody to realize that it takes the whole village, and these teachers are important, and so what they're doing, it shows.
And I just want to thank you, for those of you who are watching or viewing in later, to our administrators and our teachers for all your hard work. Thank you to district staff and Dr. Adkins for putting back into place those tools that the teachers needed to help our students for reading and math intervention components. Teachers are rejoicing over that. And I want you to know that that's what I'm hearing, and people are relieved and feel like we are, okay, so those good parts that we were implementing are back. And thank you for listening, to all of you, for listening and taking everything into consideration. I believe we're just now beginning to see that, and I agree. I am celebrating over it. Yes, will we ever get to where everything is perfect? No. But there is a great deal for us to celebrate when we think about the challenges of many of our students, our schools. I'm grateful for everyone. And we're ready to move on to?
I just wanted
Oh,
to
yes,
add
Ms.
one
Fisher.
thing. I had something funny happen to me. I had my great-grandson and my grandson, and we went on a fishing trip. And my great-grandson, who's going into first grade, said to me, "Granny, can you open school early? I'm ready to go back." So that says something.
I think some parents might agree with that, too. Just saying.
Just a
Too bad
minor
all the
piece.
students don't feel that way, right? Okay, we can move on to the assessment calendar. So, a couple of years ago, they put into legislation that the DOE has to publish an assessment calendar in a certain template form, and then we add our district progress monitoring, and then you approve it, and that is with the deadline of October 1st, but we're bringing that to you now, and then to the action meeting on August 8th, I believe, so that we can put that into place, hopefully, for everyone to be aware of that by the time school opens. So these are just some statutory references here. The DOE did very recently send us some changes to the 17-18 calendar, which we're going to talk about, based on the House Bill 7069. So you should have in the backups the latest version, which would have the date, which either would have today's date, the 25th, or yesterday's. It has yellow highlighting it for the things that I should say the state revised after we had first posted that for you. The legislation specifies what goes in that calendar, and this is a list of those things. So the state laid out the template to address each of these areas. The changes for 17-18 that were made most recently. You've heard about the elimination of Algebra 2, so we have that stricken in the document. Grade 3 reading is to remain on paper this year and not go to computer-based testing. The plan was to have everything, that was the last thing that needed to go to computer-based testing except for some of the writing tests. The Department of Education has a interesting interpretation of the language of the law, and their interpretation is that during this school year, we will leave grade 3 reading on paper, and in the 18-19 school year, certain things will kick in. One of that will be that all the assessments in grades 3 through 6 in 18-19 will be on paper. Okay? Most of those are now online. When we first read the wording, we thought it meant that everything would go back to paper.
Yeah.
But it's in the context of the paragraph that talks about the 3 through 6 assessments. So that'll be, at least so far, that's what's on the agenda for the 18-19 school year. And just as a heads up, also in that year, the legislation says that the writing test has to be done at a certain time, which is earlier, but then all of the rest of it cannot be done prior to May 1st and in the last 4 weeks of school. So we forward that information to the folks who are taking care of the school calendar to see if there's any consideration based on that, so that we at least ensure that we have enough time between May 1st and the end of school to implement all these assessments. Unfortunately, in that time frame, especially with some of them being done on paper, then the results come back a little later as well, and the school grades a little later. So but that's for the future. That's for 18-19. So in 17-18, they also adjusted some of the computer-based windows, made them a little bit later. The good news is that we have no conflicts with spring break this year. So the writing is done prior to spring break, which is March 19th through the 25th, and the rest of it is done after that, a couple weeks after, if I recall, so that we're in good shape there. We shouldn't have any interference from spring break. So what is, on the next slide, it just says what is not included in that assessment calendar. Of course, you've got all kinds of AP and ACE and all those tests going on in the spring. They are not quote-unquote required, so they don't appear there, at least not in the required section. And of course, teacher assessments, pre-K is also excluded, and there isn't a requirement for those good cause exemption assessments that were referred to in another presentation earlier. Okay, so I talked a little bit about the timeline. This is where we need to go with that, and I want to move on to the district required assessment for this coming year, unless you have some questions about the state calendar at this point. So last year we had quite a lengthy conversation about Renaissance Learning and the STAR assessments. We did implement that K-12 this past year. We like that assessment for a number of reasons. That company has been doing this for a long time. There's research behind it. They have actually done some studies using some of our data to correlate the STAR reading with the FSA in grades 3 through 10 and with the math in grades 3 through 8. They did publish some studies on the correlation between their STAR assessments and ACT, college readiness scores, so we feel that there's a good foundation for that. You will see that we use that data in progress monitoring almost every quarter. So this year, we did not include quarter 4 as required, so we're doing baseline quarter 1, quarter 2, and quarter 3. In the past, we've sometimes done it in quarter 3 and sometimes in quarter 4, but with this shift of the state test more towards the end of the school year, we don't want to do both at the end of the school year. The quarter 3 is really a perfect time for them to get a last-minute check on the students as they move into the FSA testing, if there's any additional attention needed for academic need at that time. We will review the quarter 3 progress monitoring window that you have in that document, because with these new changes, it overlaps with the state writing test. So we may make some adjustments with that. The agenda item that we're going to bring to you to approve this allows the superintendent to make some adjustments based on anything that the state decides to change.
Just a couple things about the STAR data. First of all, Dr. Itzen and his team have been involved in looking at a correlation, so I think he's going to talk about that probably next. We do use this information in our quarterly, what we were calling data dialogues. Now we're going to call it like data force, but this is where we actually sit down as a team and meet with principals to discuss where they are at a quarter. And it gives them an opportunity to express maybe concerns that they have, us to be able to provide some coaching, support, whatever's needed, and be able to make adjustments during the course of the year. So it's not as if we're waiting toward the end of the year to make adjustments, but we can literally make those changes during the course of the school year, which I think ultimately will improve student proficiency.
And is this the data that I see used in schools when students are having the data chats with the various administrators in the buildings?
Usually, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what did you say we're going to call them?
Data force.
Data force?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you.
So we did find that there were high correlations between the STAR assessments and the state tests. One exception to that was our high school math, and we knew going in that that we weren't on a solid ground in terms of predicting, how the relationship was going to be, especially because Renaissance Learning did not do that in a study for us. So we have the data now, and we've been looking at that, but the correlations really were quite high for most of the subject areas, and I'm talking 0.8 or above, and so that was very good. As you know, yes, Mr. Teuber.
Is not only the correlations, but is the familiarization, is the STAR testing in a format that gives the students the same familiarization of the way they word the questions in the FSA?
It's not, for the most part. However, the state is changing some of those. Going back to paper testing with a lot of the grade levels is going to eliminate a lot of what they call the computer-enhanced items, right? The matching and the drag and drop and those types of things. So the considerations for adopting the STAR assessment, we were trying to walk the line between correlating with our state assessment and having some sort of national perspective. And the way that they run theirs is basically a multiple choice online system, which did not give the specific, those other specialty item types. I think out of everything that we've done with STAR assessment, the parents see the value in the percentile ranks because they are national percentiles. So prior to that, when we were doing our own Common Course exams that were highly correlated with the state assessments, but there was no national perspective like that. So we had to weigh those various pros and cons.
Okay, thank you.
Very important.
The So correlation is one thing, but predicting is a little bit different. So our work over the summer has been to say, okay, if you get this score on, say, the 6th grade STAR reading assessment, that means you're going to score in level 3 on the FSA at the end of the year. So we're fine-tuning that, and we're getting to a pretty good accuracy level. The two that we had to adjust the most were the geometry and the Algebra 2. Algebra 2 at the state level, of course, is gone, but we're still going to continue to monitor that. But that has been very productive, I think, for people to be able to, as Dr. Atkins referred to, kind of predict during the year. Science and social studies, we implemented some new assessments last year for our grade 8 and grade 5 science, for biology, civics, and U.S. history for the same purpose. And it was a year where we didn't have a lot of background on how predictive they were going to be, so we're able to nail that down pretty well now, and so we have that in place for this coming year. So before, one of the things I want to mention about that testing calendar, which would be of interest to a lot of people, I think, are the testing times. The last chart in the document gives the number of minutes for each state assessment and the number of minutes that we're estimating for our district assessments. One of the reasons we chose the STAR assessment was because it can be done fairly quickly. It's a computer adaptive test, and so it can identify your level of proficiency fairly quickly. So it takes on average about 30 minutes is all. So you see the times there, they are very comparable to what they have been in the past. The requirement at the state level is not to have anything exceed 5% of the total year instructional time. The DOE has given us the number 900 hours to use as the instructional time for the year. So I didn't do all the math for you in the document, but the lowest is kindergarten, which is about 0.3% of that. It's about 2.5 hours. And the highest, I believe, was 9th grade, which comes out to just under 2% of the total instructional time. And if you look at the breakdown, it's mainly, well, 2/3 of it is the state assessment. So we don't feel like we're overburdening the students or the schools with testing. So anything else that you would like to ask about the testing calendar? If we hear of any other adjustments that need to be made, of course, we'll do those before August 8th. We will look again at the Q3 progress monitoring window, since it now overlaps the state writing test, and make adjustments as necessary.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we are moving on to public comment during briefing time. Mr. Martin, have you received any cards for public comment today?
No, ma'am.
Right, does anyone on the right-hand side of the building, my right, have a comment? And your name, please? Jane Dunn. Okay. On the left side, Mark Castellano. And Mr. Martin, would you please read the guidelines for public comment in the briefing meeting?
Board policy provides the opportunity at this point in the meeting to address the board concerning any matter on this briefing meeting agenda. The subject of comment is limited to the items on the agenda. The time allowed per speaker is 3 minutes.
Okay. All right, Ms. Young.
Down in.
Oh, I'm sorry, I got it incorrect.
Try to make it quick because I know that we're kind of running late on time. I sent most of you, if not all of you, an email concerning the lawsuit. I'm very happy to hear that you were talking about it, and very happy to hear that you are considering. I'd like to encourage you to do that, to join the lawsuit because of the, as you said, the policy that's included in a budget item, also the process that went to it, and the how it goes against the Florida Constitution, where there's more than one subject in a bill. So I think on all of these, I think you guys have got a slam dunk, especially if you get the majority of the states in on the same one. One thing that came to my mind also in that email that I sent to all of you was the inconsistency of the EOC scores across the state. There was no guidance given by FDOE on how to convert level 1, 2, 3, 4 to a grade or percentage as it's factored in for 30% of a student's grade, which means the counties were left to their own devices, and they did as they pleased. I sent you links to different articles that explain to you, for instance, in Broward County, you cannot fail the EOC. The lowest score is a D. We can fail it here. You can get an F. And some of the counties have actually broken down into smaller intervals, kind of like Dr. Itzen was saying with the buckets, where a level 1 had 3 buckets. They had 3 different conversions based on scale scores rather than level scores. The huge range of the way it's interpreted from county to county, it affects the student's GPA. I mean, my son was one of the victims, you could say, of the Algebra 2 EOC. He took it, he got a level 2, which, knowing the pass rate on that, I was actually kind of happy with that. Unfortunately, with the level 2 and the way that we convert, it actually brought him down an entire letter grade and would have hurt his GPA. Fortunately, Miss Soretta Ralph was able to control for that. She took all of the students throughout the district, and any of them that were hurt by the Algebra 2 scores, she actually did have them taken away, and our students did okay with the Algebra 2. There's actually a legislature bringing to light this at the state level, saying that the Algebra 2 should not affect the students' GPA across the state, so we're already ahead of that one. But when you look at those consistencies, you have the complete and total control on whether or not our children pass or fail the EOCs and how it affects their GPA.
Ma'am, your time is up.
Thank you.
Afternoon, Dr. Atkins, board members, Mr. Martin. My name is Mark Castellano, and I am the president of the Teachers Association of Lee County. And I will start with this. I have never been as proud of this school board. I'm not sure I've ever been proud of the school board, but I am very proud of the action that you will take tonight, that I believe you will take tonight. It is time. It is so beyond time for us to stand up. I believe Senate Bill 736 usurped our constitutional right to collectively bargain. Certain aspects, I was disappointed that even FEA did not challenge it on that basis, but 7069 goes overboard. It just is way over the top in terms of its usurpation of our rights to collectively bargain and your rights as a district to make decisions. This is critical to us. We're at a make it or break point, make or break point, I believe, in terms of public education in Florida. We really are. I think part of what led to 7069 is they have felt emboldened by what has taken place in DC, and it has been a pattern that has gone on for the last 20 years, basically, the move toward privatization of public education. So congratulations, thank you so much for what you said, and Mr. Teuber, oh my God, I don't think you and I ever agreed on anything as much as you. Stunning to me, but I truly appreciate it. I'm going to throw in one thing about the weapons policies. in my 20 years as a band director in this county, I've had the pleasure of dealing with guns on campus. I've had the pleasure of dealing with a box cutter that sliced sliced a student's back open. I have had the pleasure of dealing with kids using ballpoint pens to stab one another. I have a very, I don't know that it's a different feeling, but I have a great concern about weapons on campus, period. And I would hope that you will think through that very carefully and understand I do believe that, you know, if somebody wants to do something heinous, it can happen. But we need to do everything we can as a district to prevent those, the opportunities for that to happen. Anyway, thank you very much.
All right, and board member comments, Ms. Morgan,
I have none.
Mr. Twyber.
Madam Chair. Two things. When we were talking about the litigation on HB 7069, we talked about, you know, an adversarial position between us and charter schools, and I know Ms. Patrica she was saying in a point, I wanted to make equivocally clear, this school board has always, since the inception of charter schools, we believe in parents' right to choose. So we don't have, you know, and we've been very supportive of our charter schools. All we've asked for is that the ground levels be the, you know, the ground rules are the same. And similarly, when we talked about taxpayer money going to capital, you know, we're in a very unique situation other than anywhere in the state except for Weston that actually has a city-run government. So the applicability of a charter school, when people in Lee County think of charter schools, predominantly, especially those in the Cape and in my district, think of the Oasis charter system. That's different than 98% of the charter schools. That is a public-run school system. So for us to deal with them, you know, we have always talked about, we'd like to share that, we just don't have the money to share with them, but it's a different parameter as far as our ability to say, yes, we would do that if we had it. We would be more than welcome to do that because they're in their own financial straits for capital. But our position is private entity charter schools, and while we still support them and we want children to succeed, as Ms. Patrica made that comment, you know, we're very, very invested into our charter schools, and we have probably the largest contingency. We're one of the top districts in the state that have charter schools because we are very supportive of parents' right to choose. So I want to make that clear. And then the last thing I want to say is, you know, last Saturday I attended the funeral of Paul Sanborn in Cape Coral. Paul was born in September of 1923, and he lived 93 years, and he died here in July. Paul was known as Mr. Cape Coral, and everybody in Cape Coral that has anything to do with the furtherance of Cape Coral knew of Paul because he was a mentor and a friend to everybody. He joined the Gulf American Land Corporation back in the 60s, and he became very invested in Cape Coral. He was a charter member of the Cape Coral Rotary in 1964, serving as their president in 68. And he was a president of the Cape Coral Chamber in 83 and was elected to the Mosquito Board at being a public servant, and he served 5 terms in that capacity as a public servant. Paul was also instrumental to the furtherance of the school district, and that's why I'm bringing this forward. In 1971, the state of Florida refused to put a high school in Cape Coral, and at the time he was very involved, and his very eloquent response was baloney. And he drove to Tallahassee, and he worked with Tallahassee and got the formula to allow a school, and he worked very hard, and he got them to change the formula, bringing Cape Coral School in 1978. So because of Paul Sanborn, Cape Coral High School became to fruition. So I just want to say Paul was truly a public servant. The city of Cape Coral will sure miss him, the county of Lee County, and I just wanted to give my respect from this board.
Thank you.
That's all.
Ms. Patrica.
So I just have one request. Actually, I'm looking for board support to ask Mr. Martin to do something. Mr. Martin, I sent you a question about the difference between conflict of interest requirements or laws for school board members as opposed to state representatives and state senators, and you answered that question. But I want to ask you to go a little bit deeper and write a memo on the differences, what we're subject to versus our state delegation, with the legislation and any case law surrounding how courts have interpreted those responsibilities for school board members as opposed to state representatives and state senators. And the reason why I'm asking for it is because when I'm out talking to my constituents, they express concern about the motivation for the state's move to charter schools. They believe that it's personal benefit to our state representatives and our state senators. They get a personal benefit. So I just want us as a board and as a leadership team to be able to speak to that, and if a change needs to be made, perhaps we could think about making that change in next year's legislative platform. So I'm looking for board support to ask Mr. Martin to do that.
Absolutely.
I would be an approved. Yes, I think.
I'm agreeing.
That's it, that's all I have.
Okay.
And I have nothing.
Clever girl.
Okay, I just have a little bit. First of all, I want to thank the technical department for the new board table, and it was really a pleasure to be able to watch the presentations and be able to see it all without turning my neck all over the place. I want to thank all of the presenters, and the information was well done. It was put in a way that was comprehensive and understandable, and I really felt like Dr. Itzen. I learned a little bit more about school grading than I knew before. I also want to give a shout out to all of the welcome back activities that the district is providing for people coming in, new teachers, guest teachers, et cetera. And I want to also say that I went on the website, and there's a wonderful page on there about back to school, and it gives parents and other community members an opportunity to easily access all the information that they need to know for the start of school. So I wanted to thank Lauren for that. And I'm also very excited that one of the changes that we have in our pupil student progression plan includes comprehensive health education. And I know that we are finally voting on the policy this evening, and I'm enthusiastic about that. And other than that, I hope everyone has a great school year. Thank you.
I just have to, again, give a shout out to our staff members, and periodically, if cabinet meets, I knock on the door and I pop open and I say, I want you to know how much I appreciate you and all the work that they do. But I have to share something that was happening when I opened the door this last time, and Mr. Mora was sharing lessons learned, different aspects that I've learned throughout the construction process component, and different strategies being implemented. And as I listened to that and I thought back to what we've done with regarding addressing reading interventions and so on, I have seen many of our departments do a very good job. And this is not saying we don't need to have a full audit, but they do a very good job of monitoring themselves and auditing themselves and finding ways to improve and documenting that. And I just want to thank you for being on the lookout for those ways to improve and being cognizant of that. And that goes out there to everyone, from teachers, custodial staff, those who work in human resources, principals, for all of you who stop and take note of ways, lessons learned, how we're going to improve it in the future. And I'm glad to see that that happens regularly. And I do want to, I don't want to be remiss in noting and remembering two of our students who lost their lives last year in the Club Blue shooting, Sean Arkeles and Stefan Strouder, and for families who are grieving as they remember that evening. And Mr. Martin?
Yeah, just one quick update. I received notice this afternoon that the Bay County School Board has taken action, has taken a vote to support the litigation.
So how many are
69.
on board now?
That makes 3.
That makes
And which
3.
ones they are?
Broward, St. Lucie, and Bay. Volusia is also pending a vote this evening. That's all I have.
And Dr. Atkins.
Just a couple quick items. First of all, I'll be bringing a good cause item forward this evening, and I usually try to avoid those if I can, but I think there is a cause in this particular case. We are headed toward the opening of school, and we have still a significant number of vacancies. We have teachers that are trying to work to meet their state credentialing requirement, and what we have done in the past is put them on a long-term, in like a long-term substitute, but in that case they lose benefits. What we are recommending is a change to our supervisory salary schedule to allow a position that would be like a long-term substitute position, level 2, that would allow benefits. Some of the stipulations, however, is these are people who are proven entities who have been teaching, but because of the increased state requirements, they're not able to meet those as of yet, but are working toward that. This would be a principal recommendation, and again, the person that would be in these types of positions would have to continue to work toward that credential and would be put on a plan. So this is only a temporary avenue. But what we have seen happen is we've literally lost these people to charter schools or to other employment because they've lost those benefits. This is a small number of people, probably in the neighborhood of 14 or 15 for the start of this particular year. And again, they're working toward the credential, and we would imagine that they would be regular teachers within a short period of time. But this is, again, just a retention effort, so I'll be bringing that forward for your consideration. The only other comment, couple comments, Dr. Desamore shared with me information regarding her work toward an operational audit, and she's gotten some information back from some vendors, so I'll be meeting with you individually to discuss that in a little bit more detail, and then we'll work toward another workshop or briefing to determine what type of action the board wishes to take in that situation. And then finally, just my comments around 7069. Very proud to be a member of this governance team. I just think that's really fantastic that we're moving in the right direction, because ultimately, as many of you said much more eloquently than me, this is the right thing to do for kids. And so, again, proud to be a member of this governance team that's forwarding this effort. And that's all my comments. Thank you.
Okay. Well, seeing there's no other business, do I have a motion for, no?
No, you don't have to do that. You just,
We don't do that. That's
And
okay. So we're done.
good job.